Hello! Been doing quite a lot of things with digital quads lately, but that doesn't mean that analog's dead. While it's very cheap and very convenient and just works on anything, and you can get box calls dirt cheap, I think it'll be there until some sort of open source or very compatible HD system replaces it, which I think is still quite a long way away. So today I've got the Air75 from BetaFPV. And you may remember that I did a video on the Air75, which I really liked. It felt really like a tiny 5-inch quad. It had the right power to weight ratio. Didn't quite have the acceleration to go upwards, but going around and doing flips and that, really good. There was a problem with the camera on my one. When it looked up at the sun, the screen would tear. And at the time I didn't have a fix for this, but since that time I've been back and forth with BetaFPV, and we've now got a replacement Air75 which does work. I can't actually remember which one's which, but I'll check that out later. So what's the Air65 look like? Well, if that's the 75, this is a 65. Just very similar in terms of their design. It's very minimal. There's very little around it, and that is all down to weight saving. The other type of quad that's very popular with BetaFPV is the Meteor series. And if I compare the Air75 with a Meteor 75, this is a walk snail version, but just ignore that, you can see that the prop protectors and the canopy is much more substantial, and that'll take quite a knock. Ditto the 65 with the Meteor 65. Again, this is a DJI one, but ignore that bit. Because if this one was an analog one and we compared it, we'd have quite a weight saving. The little Air 65 weighs 17.3 grams, whereas the Meteor 65 weighs 22.83 grams. And I know you're thinking, that's 5 grams, what's that got to do with anything? If you think about it, that's nearly a third of the weight of this. So that extra weight it doesn't have to carry means it's a lot more acrobatic and nimble than its slightly fatter brother. Ditto with the Air75 versus the analog version of the Meteor 65. The Air75 is 21 grams and the Meteor 75 is 24.9 grams, nearly a quarter of the weight again. So that's what that's all about. But it does come at the cost of these being much more flimsy to feel. They're much more easy to move around. When you look at like the big Meteor 75s, that's quite chunky, which is why it weighs a bit more. Now there's actually two versions of this. I didn't actually select one, but I got sent what's called the racing version. Two differences. First off, these motors are 27,000 kV. On the freestyle version, they're 23,000 kV, and the props are slightly different. I don't do any racing, but I don't see why we wouldn't do any freestyle with it. I would like to mention their new 5-in-1 board. Previously we've had like little receivers or little VTXs and these things, but this literally does everything. This is the flight controller, it's the ESC board, it's the VTX, and it's the Express RRS receiver, all in a single board. Not sure if it comes up as a separate Wi-Fi ELRS. I'll show you a close-up of this so you can see what I mean. So aside from that, I'll show you what you get in the box, because there's not really much to look at. You get this bag, and in this bag we have this little adapter to go into the port under here. Instead of a USB directly, you plug that in and USB-C goes in that end. We have some tiny screws for something or other, and you get a spare set of props. You don't get a battery with it, which would be very useful, and it says fly at about 300 milliamp hours, which I think I've got some for. I don't know how good they are anymore. But yeah, I'm going to get this up Betaflight, get it configured, see what I need to do, and then I think we'll try it in the house. I don't fly very well in the house, but I'll give it a go, and then we'll take it around the trees and have some fun with some little proximity flights. I might take the new version of the Air75 as well, if I can figure out which version it is, and just as a comparison. Hello, welcome to the woods. My new favourite spot, because the other spot I usually fly at is been cut down a lot and it's very difficult to figure out where I am. Got the Air65, haven't flown it indoors yet. Normally I would do some indoor flights then outdoors, but this weather window is here, so I thought I'd use it. Let's try this out. I'm going to start with the Betaflight 300s. I'm not sure they're any good, but the other ones seem like a bit of a squeeze, so we'll just give it a go and see how we do. Starting out pretty slow, I'm just going to go up and down the path, see how it feels, see how the battery lasts, which is already down to 3.6 before I even started. Seemed to leak out a bit because I'm sure I put it. Oops, hello, I'm going the wrong way. Yeah, Jesus Christ. Come on, battery.
I'm going to have to try one of the decent ones, just because these ones they don't even seem to have kept the voltage I charged them at. There is a GoPro there, so let's go past it. Yeah, we're in 3.3 going there. We're going to have less than a minute on this flight. Try and get a little fly past with the camera. Let's bring it in and try sticking one of the decent batteries in there. Oops. Okay, we got one of the little 320 Dogcom batteries in, which is hopefully better. It's still showing like it's not charged. Maybe this thing needs calibrating. Yeah, but this, it already feels so different to the little DJI 65 I flew. It's just power to weight. That 5 grams makes such a difference. It's like flying a regular quad rather than something you have to be wary is not going to make it very well on turns and stuff. This thing is much easier just to throw it around a bit more, and say it barely loses any height in like a roll and stuff. The others just seem to drop like a stone. Where am I? There I am, I think. Well, there's the path somewhere. Yeah, with this piece of wood, I can actually see the path, so I can make it back. The other one I can't so much. Talking of range, can we make it to the bluebell field without crashing or losing picture? Again, the last 65 I flew, oh, that's bad. I wonder if I can get out of there. Maybe. Oh, shit. There's a lot of scraggle down there, and without an HD camera, it's a little bit tricky to see. I think I'm going the right way though. Is this back? Oh, this is bad. I do not know where I am. Ah, that looks like path. Let's go over there. Yay, there I am. Hello me. I made it. You see, with this Dogcom battery, although the batteries came out a little bit low, we've still managed to get 2 minutes out of it at least. So yeah, maybe it's a case of it's not really detecting the voltage correctly. Well, that was supposed to be a split S. Didn't do very well, did we? Let's have another go. Bit better, not fantastic. That'll do the job. So, well, this battery's just about done, I guess. Let's bring it down. There's no way of landing these. It's always a bit of a risk trying turtle mode when you don't know where you are, and I think I got away with it, but look at the amount of stuff we picked up on the props. Grass and leaves, and yeah, lucky to get that one out. Okay, battery number 3 of 4, or 4 decent ones. Pretty happy that this is feeling very nice. I can really just make easy, nice turns around these trees and use them as a little slalom course. Don't really have to think about flying it differently. I think that's the thing I'm talking about. Like with the DJI 65, or it's a BetaFPV 65 with a DJI camera, obviously. You had to completely change the way you fly in order to get it right, and getting used to that throttle was tricky. This, it's like no getting used to. It just flies like you'd expect a regular 5-inch to, which is why I make that 5-inch comparison. The VTX struggles a little bit around these trees. It goes up to 400 milliwatts, which I've got it on. But yeah, you'll know when you go behind a couple of trees or not. It'll start breaking down, but you know, it's at least gradual, unlike some digital systems which are a little bit more of a pain to deal with. I'll go around here. Can we fly through this without dying of scraggle? Yeah, that is definitely a difference. If you've flown digital systems, or if you fly digital and then you go the next battery analog, you think either your eyes are broken or the camera is. It makes a hell of a difference. But if you just come out with analog, you're good to go. And of course, it's very cheap. Box goggles are, you know, stupidly cheap. So I think it's still very much a viable option, especially if you're just, you know, starting out in the learning. I've actually got, normally I have Curry K as like my pilot name on this, and that was mostly because when I used to fly with people, it's like we'd be on the same channel sometimes. With these I've actually put it as Air65, Air75 because they're set up exactly the same and they so far feel very much the same, so I just want to actually put something there so I knew which one I was flying. Mostly when it comes to doing the editing, because it's like, oh right, this looks like, what is it? It's like, yeah, if I don't write down what I'm flying, it's hard to tell. Most quads, there's something on them that I can just tell, but these have the same view, they have exactly the same OSD, so I put a name on it.
Well, that was a couple of batteries of live commentary. If you like that sort of stuff, I published the entire flying I did here, which was 4 batteries on the 65, 2 on the 75, of which I sort of talk through them or mutter through them as you may find. But I'll leave a link to that video in the description. So I carried on flying the Air65, felt really good, very nimble going around this. Absolutely my favourite type of flying, going through the woods with one of these small quads where you can just really throw it around and just be able to recover it so easily. I then flew the Air75 straight after because I wanted to get a direct comparison, and it was very interesting because where the Air65 felt extremely nimble, that extra little bit of weight on the Air75 meant you could really feel the difference in the turns. But on the flip side, it felt you could get a lot faster, and because it was faster and heavier, it had more inertia. So when you're doing things like a split S on the little 65, if you're not going fast enough, it will just sort of stop going forward, just sort of fall down. Whereas on the 75, you've got that little bit more that carry you forward, so it's a much easier to do a sort of gradual turn around. But there were pros and cons of both. Pro in the 65, it is so nimble. You can just turn on a dime, and that's really nice. However, battery life, not so good. On the 75, not quite as nimble. I'm nitpicking here, but you've got a lot more battery life out of it. So I got home and tried some flights indoors. Now, the first thing I noticed about this is it does not want to be flown slowly. In a tight environment like this, even in angle mode as I'm using, it's quite difficult. The camera points up quite a bit, and the throttle is pretty sensitive. So if you're thinking about this as a first quad, I don't think this is the right one. I think perhaps one of BetaFPV's other quads, like the Meteor series, is a bit more friendly to beginners. It doesn't quite have this raw power, and you can mess with the camera angle a bit more. What I did do on this is I put a throttle limit on, and I changed some of the PIDs just to try and smooth things out a bit. And this is me flying with that throttle limiter on, and basically a rate change to try and smooth things out. Still flying in angle here. That's the only way I can really fly indoors in this sort of tight environment, and even then on this quad that's quite difficult. Unfortunately, we did have an issue with this quad. I've been discussing it with BetaFPV to see what the problem is, and it seems like I've got a fault on the board. What would happen is, if I crashed this quad, basically knocked it, or it overheated, the accelerometer would go a little bit crazy. As an example here, I knocked into this door and then had a bit of a crash and had to right myself. So if I try to take off again in angle mode, despite the stick not doing anything, you can see it going off to the side there. If I then move into acro mode and do it, it's all okay, because of course acro mode doesn't use the accelerometer. Here's another example. I've crashed going down the stairs. I turtle mode myself back over. Eventually, pop it into angle mode, arm it, and no, it says it just turns over basically. BetaFPV says this is the first time they've seen this. It's essentially the gyro and accelerometer is on the same chip. that chip is either damaged or there's a bit of a loose solder joint which is getting a problem when it heats up. So if this happens to you, you have a fault and they'll replace it. They're going to send me a new board when they next send me something, so I'll be able to test that back out again. But yeah, it's difficult flying acro indoors in tight spaces, and that's how I had to get it back most of the time, which is tricky. Although I really enjoyed flying outside, inside, aside from the fact that the chip had a problem on there, it's less suitable for like really tight spaces, unless you're really, really good. I am not. And I don't fly something that really wants to go fast and has got quite an up tilt on the camera around my house very well at all. And that comes down to who's this for? And I would say this isn't your, like, my first quad sort of thing. It's not a beginner's thing. It is a little bit flimsier than the other ones. You could break some of these bits a little bit easier than you could in something like the Meteor series. So if you're starting out, slightly heavier, slightly chunkier and more robust quad like the Meteor 65 or Meteor 75, I would think is a much better deal. You can lower that camera angle, you can fly it a lot slower, a lot easier. These things, they just want to rip around, and that is great for doing what I like to do in the woods, but less good if you haven't flown before or you're doing things inside. So just bear that one in mind. But anyway, this was absolutely excellent. Of course, I'll be coming back to it when I get the replacement board just to make sure all that works. Links are down below, of course, if you want to check it out in more detail. I hope that's been helpful. I will catch you next video. Bye for now. Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.